Thank you, Laura Sheets. What a pleasure. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. We're so glad to be with you. This is our opportunity to gather together as librarians, educators, and teachers to pause, to reflect, and to have a conversation. And our hope this morning is that we can facilitate a conversation with you. We're going to begin our time sharing a little bit of our own story of how Laura and I collaborated together here at Baylor. And then we'll transition to some poll questions, some breakout rooms, some discussion, and then come back together as well. So we'll hope to do that for 3 consecutive times throughout our time this morning. But as we begin, I'd like to invite you into a check-in, just to drop into the chat a one-word response of how you're coming to this session this morning. What's the one word to describe how are you feeling? How are you showing up to be with us today? I would just love to see what it is that you're bringing. Curious, excited, expectant, exploring, intrigued. I love it. Hopeful, good, grateful,
Hmm.
wondering, happy.
Wow, all positive.
I know, right? Sometimes it's okay to write man, just I'm here, right? And those one words. The value of having these check-ins as educators is to recognize we are humans, and the power of being together is valuable to say that we're going to promote awareness with how we're doing. We're going to fully arrive to be present with one another. So if you have any other words that you would like to share, that would be great. Mine would be expectant. I'm really looking forward to this time with you. Maybe a little anxious, if I'm fully honest, thinking about, will people talk? That's always my biggest thing about leading a discussion. But when we go into the break rooms, I will ask that you turn on your cameras so that you can be present there. In this first initial part, having your cameras on is not necessary, but as we go on in our conversation, please be present with us and allow us to hear your voice. Laura Semrau is our humanities librarian here at Baylor, and I serve as the university archivist for Baylor, which means that I'm promoting the university's story, its history, and promoting and telling that broadly. Our jobs and roles here are very different. So this particular conversation is really key to say just because our roles are different doesn't mean or exclude us from being able to collaborate. And that's what we're hoping to show and be able to share with you today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Laura Semrau. I'm the humanities librarian here at Baylor. So that means I support the English, history, and modern language departments. It's a joy and a privilege to work here at Baylor. And just in case you're not familiar with Baylor University, we are located in Waco, Texas. We were founded in 1845. We have approximately 20,000 students, so about 15,000 of those are undergrads and roughly 5,000 are graduate students and in professional programs. And just to explain the basics of how our library system is set up, because it's relevant to what we're going to share today. The hub, the kind of mothership of our libraries, is Moody and Jones Libraries. So those serve all the disciplines. My office is located in Jones Library, but then because we're, a big institution, we have special libraries spread across the campus. So there's the Texas Collection, the Keston Center, Pogue Library, and the Armstrong Browning Library, which has the world's largest collection of materials from Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, the Victorian poets. That's housed in a gorgeous library with stained glass windows, but that library and others are spread across campus, so it can make collaborating a bit challenging for us librarians. But we are making that work, and we'd love to share a bit of our story from this last academic year. So just our plan for the next hour or so is to share how Elizabeth and I have collaborated to support one particular class. But then the bulk of our time is going to be given over to a discussion. We have three main questions about collaboration and challenges surrounding collaboration. And we want to hear how it's going for you at your campus or your institution, or wherever you happen to be collaborating. And we hope that that discussion will lead you to reflect on ways to possibly collaborate more or differently in the future.
When I began my tenure at Baylor, I learned that they have opportunity for teaching fellowships, which is a program where university professors come to one of the special collections for 20 hours during the summer to either revamp or create a new course and use the materials in the special collections. And last summer, I had the opportunity to work with one of the English professors, Dr. Sarah Ford. Her specialty is American literature. She came and used a collection of Dorothy Scarborough, and she spent 20 hours in the archive going through the documents and in preparation for her ethno-Gothic literature course. The significance of this was historically, when professors have come in, they have done their 20 hours, engaged with the materials, and then gone on to teach their coursework. I approached Dr. Ford and wanted to see, would she be willing to not only use the archival materials in her course, but to have the students to come in and use them, and then to possibly allow us more time with the students and the archival materials. And she was very receptive. And so then I peeled back another layer of the onion and said, would you be willing if we brought in Laura Semrau? She's our humanities librarian. She would be able to provide the students great instruction regarding secondary resources that are available. And she was like, why, yes, that sounds great. And then when Laura came along and we pitched one more idea to add another person, she couldn't say no. She was already saying yes. So the goodness and the blossoming just continued. So from this, not only did Dr. Ford come in and use the archival material, which is always great, but then we got the students in the archive and they were able to use that material. But they did not just come into the archive one time, but they came in 3 times into the archive. But then when we said they're going to have some training, would you let us come to your classroom to provide just traditional bibliographic instruction and allow Laura to provide that and for me to provide the archival instruction so that when they show up in the archive, instead of our spending time explaining how to do the research, how to request the materials, we're already engaging. She loved it. So we were able to use 4 different class periods with Dr. Ford, 1 for bibliographic and archival instruction, and then 3 for allowing the students to pore over the archive.
So I was thrilled when Elizabeth invited me to join her in this support for Dr. Ford, not only because the subject of the class, Eco-Gothic literature, was fascinating, but also because I had never worked in an archive before, even though I have a library degree and have done many years of study in the world of English literature. I just hadn't had a chance to do any hands-on archival research. And to be honest, it is slightly intimidating, right? So Elizabeth helped demystify that experience by teaching me some of the basics, like we don't have to use white gloves anymore. We just have to be sure our hands are clean, how a finding aid works, how to take your photos if you find something wonderful, take your photos with the folder title list, in your photos so that you can come back to it if you realize, oh, what was that thing I found? You can find it again in the folder, and little tricks like that. So not just the logistics of how, but just the world opened up to me of what an exciting type of research this can be. Maybe it happens to be that because I love the world of books, it was fun for me to look at the first draft of The Wind and to start understanding the context for the writing of that book. But it's also the personal life of Dorothy Scarborough. So just to give a second of background here, Dorothy Scarborough was a Baylor graduate and she taught here. So that's why her her archive has landed here at Baylor. But she was an amazing, brilliant woman living about 100 years ago, who taught at Columbia University in the field of English literature. And she had a love for folk songs, and she would she has the archive demonstrates her way of working, how she recorded folk songs 100 years ago. And as Elizabeth and I spent time, we realized, oh, like we want to spend more time. So we set up weekly meetings to gather throughout the fall semester in preparation for this spring class that was coming up. And we realized that the letters reveal that Dorothy's personal life and her professional life were intertwined. She was friends with her editors and the people who ran cotton mills, and her like the pieces of the puzzle of her life start coming together, and you just want to figure out more. And she has not been studied all that much. So it just makes you thirsty to try to understand, who is this person? And so excited. So I was thrilled to have this introduction to archival research, and it just made me excited to do further research like this in the future. So to support Dr. Ford's class, which did happen this past February, so during the spring semester, I put together a LibGuide, which included background information, links to MLA bibliography, so students could, figure out the context for their research. There are some scholars who have written about Scarborough. And then some unique kind of tools as well. Dr. Ford wanted the students to think about the environmental context that this book was being written in, and that Scarborough might have experienced as a child growing up in West Texas. So we found weather maps and diaries that would have been relevant to help students do that kind of historic weather research. Then also links to a digital tool that I'll show you next, as well as a link to the archive finding aid and that the students would need to use in order to request the materials they wanted to see when they came to the archive. So we put all this together in the LibGuide, and thankfully the students used it. About 250 views in a few months, so that was worth the time putting those resources together in one place. So because we had this good amount of lead time before the class was going to take place, we started brainstorming about what if we could do even more to support these students. So I had learned about some introductory digital humanities tools available to us thanks to our wonderful folks in our data and digital scholarship program. So our colleague Josh Bin was ready to build a tool to support this class as well. So we put together something called a sentiment analysis tool. Since the text was out of copyright and already digitized and online, we could manipulate it easily, right? So we used Voyant tools to make this word cloud that you see here. And then Josh built a tool for us that does this sentiment analysis put into this dashboard. So just to explain briefly how that works, and Elizabeth has sent you the URL if you'd like to see the site live. So the sentiment analysis means we take the body of the text and we see the trends of the language throughout whatever chunk you want to analyze. So you'll see here that the general first half of the book is a positive tone. And then as things go south for the main character and what her experience is, there's a downward trend in the language. So it's not just an overall arc of the entire book. You can search for individual words or phrases using this search field right here, and kind of look at do reading in a different way than you might traditionally. So for instance, a group of students looked at the development of the main character, whose name is Letty, and they were surprised when they discovered that the associations around her name were negative for the most part, until she decides near the end of the novel to escape her situation and run out into the desert. And they saw positive connotations around her name as that development happens in the plot. So those are things that they might not have seen if they were, as you read linearly, you notice certain things. But this kind of tool opens up a whole new world of analyzing the text that's really exciting, and the students really enjoyed it. So we were thankful for Josh putting that tool together for us.
Absolutely. And because students could move away from reading just literally, but to literally slice it and dice it, it allowed us to open up a whole new world when they came into the archive. Instead of just having one instruction time with them, we moved into a more in-depth period. So students had the tools digitally, and then when they came into the archive, they had better questions. They had an understanding of taking the time to read the text on the page and to be able to engage with that. So we modeled that for them on the first day where they were in small groups talking about things that they were finding, and then they would report up and out to share what stood out, because sometimes as they were sharing with one another, they found insights that a fellow peer noticed that they wouldn't have noticed, but it answered their own research question better. So it moved from having them to think of this research as being so individualistic to also allowing them to see the benefits of collaborating in their own learning. But Dr. Ford, she said, I knew that the students would enjoy it, but her quote on the screen is striking because she didn't know that they would love it. And as an archivist, you have no idea what that does for me. It just thrills me so much for people to want to be in the archive and to experience the slowness, the stillness, and be able to get another person's story, right? That's why we save these things, is to be able to give them another experience. So then Dr. Ford's experience was great, and I want my professors to have a wonderful time. But I'm always wondering, after the fact, what about our students? Can we assess the students? And so I sent a survey to the students. And of the 17 students who participated in the class, 15 of them completed the survey, which also is just really exciting. But what they say is even more so. This survey, I gave them a 7-point Likert scale so that they could really weigh in to say if they really liked it or did not. And so these two questions indicate that the students found that Baylor University Archive is a place of learning. 93% agree strongly, and 6% moderately agree. And then for how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the overall learning experience? 87% of our students were extremely satisfied and 13% were moderately satisfied. So also very encouraging results to see. But then I want to know more. I want to see what they actually say. What do they think? So I give them an opportunity to provide their own feedback. And so on the screen, we've shared 4 comments from the students. But in student 1, the student seems to appreciate the hands-on nature of archival work, perhaps in contrast to working solely with primary sources that are in the digital realm. Student 3 highlights the fact that the experience plants the possibilities for students to go on and do archival research that they may never have done before. We as professors, teachers, educators, librarians are planting seeds, and sometimes we just don't know how the flower is going to produce, let alone bloom and blossom. But sometimes these quotes give us a little insight into that. And then in student 2 and 4, they address the complexities in accessing archives. It's not easy. It's very
Mm,
intimidating,
mm,
right? And so my job as an archivist is to break down those historic walls and barricades and to show people that an archive is a place for them. It's a place for them to engage. It's a place for all of us to learn. It's not just a place for elite scholars and researchers. So, but sometimes the physical proximity and that learning curve that Laura addressed earlier can really intimidate and cause people to back away. And so the more that we bring them in and guide them and set them up for success, the more opportunities they will have to enjoy, to learn, and to grow. So this collaboration with Dr. Ford really became successful because she was willing to let others in, right? And then we brought in Laura, and then we brought in Josh, our digital humanities specialist. And so honestly, without them and without their willingness to collaborate, we would not have had the success that we did in the outreach and the making things more accessible to the students. Jeremy Atkinson is one of the good scholars right now talking about what is collaboration and others in the field as well. But I really liked this quote as we move in from the presentation part more into our discussion. The output of the process will be a richer picture of the area under investigation than would be obtained by one section of a library or a library working on its own. So now is our time that we want to do our first poll with you. We want to know, with whom do you collaborate? Are you collaborating more with non-teaching faculty, people outside the library? Are you collaborating primarily with people in the library? Are you doing an amazing job and collaborating with everybody? Are you doing both?
Oh, so it looks like we're also getting a sneak peek into our other polls.
It is.
Yes. So
Okay.
this is great. We're just going to, should we save that? How should we do that?
Just focus on answering the first one. I don't know if they'll be able to answer the second and third one later, but if they want to go ahead and put it in, that's all right. But we'll focus on this first one right
Yeah,
now.
that's great. Wonderful.
Yeah. So it looks like 69% of those who responded are collaborating with both in and out of the library. It's fluctuating a little bit. Right now it's 67, but it's right in there. Almost 70% of you are collaborating with both. For those who are collaborating with teaching faculty or only within the library, I hope you will specifically speak up in our breakouts, sharing what are the primary reasons for that. Are they obstacles? Are they challenges? Or is it the way your library is structured? Sometimes within the management of it, it precludes collaborating with people outside of the library. So I'm going to go ahead and press in poll. And we'll go and talk about this first question and talk about how we're going to break out into the breakout rooms. So the first question that we propose is, how has collaboration increased accessibility and improved outreach at your library? We're going to drop that question into the chat because once Andrea places us in breakout rooms, we don't know if you'll still be able to see the screen. But here's the protocol of what we're hoping. We're going to spend about 8 minutes in the breakout rooms. Laura and I will pop into some of them to just listen, to engage with you a little bit. And during your 8 minutes, I hope that you'll turn your cameras on, introduce yourselves briefly to those who are in your room with you, and then to answer this one question. Once you've got a consensus about the question, we're hoping that you'll select one who will be the reporter, who can then report out once we get back all together. And to unmute yourself, turn on your camera again, and tell us, what was your group's consensus to this question? How did you answer it? And how did it differ within the group as well? Does that sound good? Yeah?
Sounds
All right.
good.
Andrea's
Thank
going to
you.
put us in breakout rooms.
All right, so we're going to be in breakout rooms of about 4 to 5 people. So there's going to be 7 breakout rooms. Is that okay, Laura and Elizabeth?
Great, thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, is everyone back? Are we here?
I think we're still waiting. It said it would take about 60 seconds for everybody to come back in from the rooms. Yeah.
Great.
I enjoyed the chat I was involved with. We learned that there are so many different ways to structure libraries, and sometimes libraries are kind of married together. One person shared about a county library that's together like one together with an academic library, if I understood correctly. So their structure forces them to collaborate, kind of whether they like it or not. But it sounds like they do a great job of working together. So let's take a few minutes. If anybody wants to share either in the chat or I don't know if they have the ability to unmute themselves, but we'd love to hear what some other groups learned.
You do have the ability to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have just changed that setting. So yes, if you would like to unmute yourself and share what you learned in your room, please do so.
One of the things that I learned is I'm okay with silence as I've learned to collaborate. And sometimes just being still and waiting enough for the technology to go allows you to just take a minute to pause and not having to feel as though you're rushed. All right, so she says the mics are enabled.
Hey, oh, cool. Sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Neil Lawson. I'm the business librarian for the University of Southern Mississippi. I work on our Gulf Park campus in what we call the Gulf Coast Library. Elizabeth asked me to share my collaboration story with you, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So last year I attended the Mississippi Librarians Conference, and I learned about a group of other libraries in Mississippi had started some wellness programs for their students. And I thought that was a great idea. So I came back to my supervisor, who's the head of the Gulf Coast Library here in Long Beach. And she fully supported my idea. And so I was able to start a series of wellness programs for our students here in Long Beach at the Gulf Coast Library. We started what we call a relaxation room for students that has comfortable seating and great books on like mindfulness, as well as just fun books to read and things. It also has lots of different types of fidgets and things like fidget spinners, tangle toys, stress balls, those types of things. And we also had a series of wellness programs this past semester to improve our students' mental and physical well-being. Like we had a mindfulness meditation presentation, a physical fitness presentation, and therapeutic art presentation. We had a yoga presentation scheduled, but it had to be canceled. And we also had therapy dogs during finals week. So Elizabeth wanted me to share that collaboration story with you. So thank you everyone for your attention.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That sounds like a great program.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Janet if she would come off of mute and share if she's willing. She's written a great comment here.
Yeah, I started typing when it was muted still, but basically, like we discussed, like how some of the common methods of engaging faculty, like through Canvas courses, like through like maybe a first year experience course, or like an embedded librarian or traditional library orientations. But we did talk about how it sometimes is really challenging to, even faculty that you have a very close relationship, are often hesitant to give up class time. And they're very supportive of the library and what we do generally, but are they like letting us actually get in there to do some teaching is tough, because it's so important to our mission and oftentimes like to our outcomes, but it's ultimately still at their invitation.
We are dependent on those invitations. And I think that's one reason why I think as librarians, the more that we can collaborate with one another and extend invitations to others, sometimes people will see, oh, they know how to do that. They're doing it all really well already. But sometimes it's just the professors are so focused on teaching specific content that they miss what we can provide as librarians to teach and give someone tools to be able to learn content later. So when you wrote that, Janet, that's immediately what I thought of. I've seen it over and over and over again. They think that that particular content is what the students need. And sometimes it's, especially in our digital world, it's learning how to use systems. It's learning how to search. It's learning how to ask questions rather than being told a certain content. What do you think, Janet? What's your experience been with that?
Oh, I mean, I agree. And that's one of the things that we try to emphasize when we tell faculty, like, one of the advantages, like I'm at a small community college, and so like one of the things I you know, like our orientations be more like general library overviews, but our emphasis is more on like getting students comfortable with one, just the existence of a library, where we're at, what you can do here, but also that encouraging them like to talk to us and demystify. And I think that seems to be kind of the general that came up with the other participants as well.
Thank you, Janet. Reagan's put something into the chat where she wants to come off mute and share that before we move on. And I think another has also shared, either of you.
I'm happy to talk about it. So we discussed in our group just the importance of that kind of like long-term relationship building to those kind of more robust collaborations, and the importance of like that iterative collaboration. So maybe starting with something that's like very much a one shot, and through feedback and like analysis of the results of that work, being able to kind of build out more robust collaborations over years. And thinking about like everything, right? Like every chance to talk as like an opportunity, right? To like build a future collaboration. And we also discussed the difficulties of at campuses without a first year experience or a first year seminar, ways to kind of build and scaffold information literacy across years and across the curriculum.
Wonderful points. Yeah, Elizabeth and I have been talking about the importance of reflection, what you just mentioned, to stop and think, okay, we started a relationship here. I had an opportunity to teach their class one time. How can I build off of that? So thank you for pointing that out. I really appreciate that. Elizabeth, do you think we should move on to our next question?
Yes, probably so, but I love that, Letitia, if I've mispronounced your name, I do apologize, but make sure you've taken an opportunity to read that in the quote in the chat, excuse me. But yes, roadblocks.
Okay. So yes, I just want to explain this idea, and you can enter the poll while we're thinking about the idea of roadblocks. So sorry about that in the middle of the screen there, but there's the poll screen, there's the roadblocks screen. So we've been talking about when things go well, but they don't always go well, right? So there's all sorts of barriers that might interrupt collaboration from happening easily, or going as well as you might hope. So we have a quote here: lack of proximity can often act as a barrier to the exchange of ideas. It can be, as we mentioned earlier, our physical setup on our campus means that Elizabeth's office is about 8 minutes walk away from my office. She has wonderful colleagues in her building. I have wonderful colleagues in mine, but it's harder to work together because we don't necessarily see each other every day. So this picture here is the building where Elizabeth works, which houses the Texas collection as well as some of our other special collections. But some students and faculty have never entered that building, and they walk by it often, but they might think, oh, I think that's one of the libraries, but not really be sure about what's inside. But for the students we worked with in Dr. Ford's class, once we, told them how to make an archival request. They had this wonderful practice in Dr. Ford's class. Now they've been invited in, they know how to use the materials, and now it's not such a mystery anymore. So it's not just this physical distance, it can be many other things. So as we show on our poll here, thank you for putting that up. What are some roadblocks you've encountered when collaborating? Personalities. Not everybody wants to work with other people, right? Sometimes that's certainly understandable, but it can be challenging. Maybe the leadership is not supportive. Maybe it's the institutional structure, right? Sometimes it's not really encouraged in the way that your organization is set up, physical proximity or something else. So thank you for entering this poll. Let's take a second. I think there's a few people who haven't submitted their answers, or is it still open or not, Andrea?
Yes, it It is still open.
Okay, so let's take 10 more seconds. I think there might be about 10 of you who have not answered this poll, so we'd love it if you wouldn't mind answering that, just to kind of get a sense of what you all have encountered.
And it will not let the hosts vote. So it looks like we've got 17 of 22 so far.
Okay. Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds. So institutional structures and physical proximity seem to be the greatest challenges so far, but there's all sorts of other things going on out there, right? So this leads us to our next discussion question. Thank you so much for participating in that poll. What are some times you've experienced barriers to successful collaboration? Let's spend some time talking about, I'm sure everybody has a story about when things haven't gone quite so well when it came to collaboration. So we're going to spend another 8 minutes in breakout rooms again. We would love it if you would be willing to share your stories and again, select a representative who might be able to kind of synthesize or represent some idea coming out of your discussion. If you have time, we also have this idea of assessment. Kind of has been touched on a little bit before, but how do we measure if a collaboration has been successful or not? And how do we build off of that? So we kind of have two-part question, feel free to focus on the first one if that's how your discussion goes. But let's go ahead and jump into round 2 of breakout rooms. Thank you so much. Okay. I hope you all had some good discussion. Feel free now to share either again through the chat, or if you would love to be a representative for your room, we would love to hear some of the discussions that happened.
So this is Laura Sheets. So I think one of the things that Tia and I talked about, and we actually talked about this started talking about it in our first breakout, is that she's a law librarian, so she is physically away from the main campus. So she doesn't get a lot of collaboration time with other library colleagues or other people on campus. So that's a physical roadblock because there is physically a road between her and the main campus. One of the things that I talked about, especially because with this session, because it is with a librarian and an archivist, we only have one library on my campus, and we have a very robust special collections at BGSU. It's one of the things we're most known for. And my role is kind of a programmatic instruction, kind of a coordinator, but that's not my title. But I've always had difficulty with some of my colleagues in special collections who kind of view their instruction as something completely different from what we do as more the traditional subject librarians. They, for some reason, they think, well, pedagogically and just philosophically, what we do is very different and it's never going to be together. And that's just one of the, for some reason, philosophically, I've never been able to connect with a couple of those people in special collections to do like collaborative teaching. So that's just one of the philosophical differences that immediately came to my mind when thinking about roadblock.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. That gets at the personality and the structures, right? Because there has to be the willingness on behalf of the staff member, in addition to the structures that help support that collaboration. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I just saw in the chat, we talked about publicity marketing aspects. David, if you wouldn't mind sharing, we would love to hear from you. Otherwise, we can glean from the chat. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so in our group, 2 of us shared about some great programs that we held either with other groups, some that were either on our campus or off campus, and just the fact that the marketing and getting people to realize, oh, this is happening, oh, I want to come, can be such an issue. Sometimes it's, if it's off campus in some place, you have the weather and things that'll affect it. But other times it's just getting that word out, the word of mouth, to really make sure people really know about something that's been scheduled and come because of the importance of it. And then the other part that came up was in some places, I don't know, affecting everyone, but some places we lose space, library space as things go along. And so for one of our people, they had lost the number of seats in their computer lab. So shrinking as to how many people you can have, can you really get an entire class into that computer lab for an activity based on size that you now have and things of that sort to be issues.
Wow.
And then what you have to do to change to be able to reach out to them.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Like there's so many facets there, but it's even in the days of social media where we could blast information online about activities or events happening, that there's still like the barrier of getting people actually in the door for an event, and it can be so difficult. My group mentioned if they're a small staff, like they're wearing so many hats that they just don't have the capacity to be able to do much more than like get the doors open, if they're also managing circulation or many different facets, it can be hard to even make any time for anything extra, right? If they're so overloaded. So Tina, thank you for sharing. We discussed the importance of communication between planners and getting buy-in from faculty. Tina, do you want to share more? It's totally up to you.
It's a matter of one, communication, especially in the beginning when you're trying to plan something. It just getting like people to respond to your emails, or just getting able to reach whoever you're trying to coordinate with. And then also, everybody's focused about, let me get into your classroom, but it always seems to fall at a time that's not really pertinent to instruction. It's so instead of just kind of placating, well, not their words, but instead of placating the librarian just to get in there, we really want to get in there when it's needed right before an assignment is due. So that way they can retain some of it, or, have a better vested interest in paying attention. So that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Communication and I think it's not just, I think it's a culture too. If the library creates a culture, and if people before you have been good at collaborating, it helps pave the way for the future. Yeah. Any other final thoughts on roadblocks or barriers? Okay, I'm just wondering, just want to check in, Elizabeth, we are at 11:06. Do you think we have time for another set of breakout rooms, or should we make a shift here?
We need to punt and make a shift in respect of people's time.
Right,
so
right.
It can be done right at 11:15. Is everyone okay with that change?
Sounds good to me. That makes sense. Yeah.
Trust. You think that it's just a word, but then the more that you work in a library and you get to know people and you recognize the difference in approaches, whether it's philosophical, whether it's personality, it is everything. And Denise Brush recently shared an article in the College News and Research article about this. And I love this quote: "A lack of trust can easily occur between library employees who don't know each other." And sometimes it's just a matter of offering someone to go for a coffee, or who works in the library with you, or sometimes it's just saying good morning and taking 5 minutes of the day to not worry about a task, and in an exchange just to say hello, how are you? What did you do for the weekend? Especially with those people who perhaps have a more traditional approach to special collections and archives. They really can be the curmudgeons. I'm gonna say. I work with them, I know. And so to bring them along lovingly, it's a challenge. And so honestly, that's the reason why I created question number 2. Like, when do you decide enough's enough, or are you gonna come along? So I'm sharing something there that I hadn't intended to share, but with Laura's sweet comment, it resonated again with me. So because of our time, we're going to skip question 3 as a breakout session, but just to think about, post-COVID has changed the way that we relate to each other. And so how can we seek to build some relationships? And one thing that I would say is just an opportunity to have a conversation with them. Yeah. And then if it's say hello to those curmudgeons 3 days a week, right? And then the next week you say hi 5 times, right? I'm not kidding. I mean, because these people have a tendency to get off in their corners, and you're thankful they're in their corners, but it's also dangerous that they're in their corners. You know what I'm saying? So bringing them out a little bit. But the last slide is we're excited. And we just wanted to tell you that what a joy it's been. Thank you for engaging with us. Thank you for speaking. I just wish I could say every single one of your names again, but you had some great comments. But we're definitely anxious to hear from you. Please connect further with us. We're sharing our emails here with you. If we can assist you in any way, whether it's to listen, to help coach, to just be able to say, yeah, curmudgeons exist in the library. We're not going to lie, but we're going to lovingly bring them along to build collaborative relationships, because we've seen that the best way to encounter faculty, the best way to engage the students' learning is when we work together, because it's when we blossom together, we grow together. So thank you so much for your willingness to be here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody, for participating and hanging with us to this point. I guess we have a few minutes for any questions that you might have for Elizabeth or me. I think there might have been a question earlier on. Laura, the other Laura or Andrea, is there anything we need to follow up on?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I just want to thank you both so much. I really think that last section was a call to action for me, and I really appreciate that.
Welcome.
I really, really do. So yeah, there was a question that I want to come back to from Lori. Did Dr. Ford see increased grades and or participation or knowledge in this class compared to other classes taught without the specific instruction and archives experience? Which I think is a fantastic question, Lori. Thank you for that.
I want this question written down and sent to me later. This is
right. I know, right?
I'm going to follow up with Dr. Ford to get a better response. Thank you. This is the first time she's taught this specific course, but she's a tenured professor. And so I think we can tweak the question a little bit, and instead of it being for this particular course, to say as a general rule, did you see some increase? One thing that I did not share in the survey that came out, that a student said she was interested in archival science and information science and going to library school. And because I did the survey anonymously, I was like, well, I'd love to help you, but I don't know who you are. And the student was willing to come back to the professor, and she said, will you sit with her? Will you show her around? I was like, absolutely, let's do it. So we did see that. But as far as increasing grades, haven't asked Dr. Ford that question, but I would definitely be interested to know. But seeing their feedback on the survey, for me, sometimes it's less about the actual grade and more about the true learning. One of the reasons why I went into archival science is because it's learning over the long haul, and it's less about, let me memorize and cram everything into my brain to pass a multiple choice quiz and test, right? How many of you remember any of that content from your days in college, right?
Right.
None of us, but you do remember those experiences. And working in an archive, you have experiences, and that's the value of the special collections and the archive. That changes the learning. And that's the reason why it's so important to bring in all the pieces as we present this, because otherwise it's like saying, I have a wonderful dinner for you, but you're not invited because you don't know to start on the outside, working in fork, and this is the dessert spoon, right? It's too much. So bring it down. I hope that's somewhat answers the question.
That's great. What a great metaphor. Thanks, Elizabeth. I think you did answer this in the chat, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to give more details. So Kelly had asked, is the teaching fellowship a specific program to Baylor, or is it a grant? And you had said that it's specific to Baylor and gave a link, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe give any more details or specifics.
Sure. You can Google the teaching fellowships. It is a small grant that the university provides to the professor. I think I'm going to go on a limb, but I think it's something like $1,250. So it's not a whole lot, but it's enough to entice them to come in and to work with material, right? But I can see that grants, a university could apply for this to be able to use, whether it's something through an NEH or it may be a smaller grant through the temple or any of those foundations would be great. Because sometimes, let's be honest, the way that Laura demystified and explained that, Laura's a librarian and she hadn't been into the archive. How many of our faculty members haven't either? And so they also, there's trepidation, let's be honest. And then there's also the curmudgeons. So you're like, you're afraid and you're a bully and you're mean. Thank you. Right. So let's just be honest, that is an opportunity to look into. And librarians are great to write grants. And I know that it can be a lot of work, but that's another way to get the faculty in. Money always speaks. Come on.
It does.